I am opening the.
That's your computer.
Like they show up, they're not sick, they don't know. How? Oh, they get stuck with the hospital. Yeah. No. Yeah, I know, right? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, why not? Right, it's coming back. I'm healthy as far as I know. You? Yeah, yeah. Hi, Isabel. Good. Well, I guess that's why we will risk the vaccine. Where one is not. Yeah.
Welcome everyone to the special meeting of the Board of Trustees. We are reconvening from closed session. I think just follow. Does that matter? They asked me to speak louder, so I will do my best. Welcome to the special meeting of the Board of
Bienvenidos
Trustees.
a esta junta.
Reconvening from closed session, and there is nothing to report out. Could we have a roll call, please?
Vamos a tomar lista en este momento.
Student trustee Stead. Student trustee Osuna. Trustee Thompson.
Here.
Trustee Stevenson.
Here.
Trustee Sarver.
Here.
Vice President Ginn.
Here.
President Dubois.
Here.
A quorum is present.
Thank you. And as far as public comment, just want to remind everybody that if you would like to do public comment, you can turn in a card if you're in the room. And if you're not, and I'll be reminding of the public comment rules in a minute, you are also able to make public comment on Zoom.
Les gustaría entregar a ustedes, por ejemplo, alguna nota o algún recado. Si estás en el cuarto, puedes entregar una.
Next item is approval of the agenda.
También vamos.
Are there any changes to the agenda? Thank you.
I second.
Thank you. All in favor of approving our agenda? Aye. The agenda is approved. And as I said earlier, there is no report out from closed session. Now it's time for public comment. This is for items that are not on this agenda. Do we have any public comment? I don't see
I have not
any.
received any cards.
You don't have any?
No cards.
No cards, thank you. And I don't see anyone with their hand up on Zoom.
No estamos viendo a ninguna persona con la mano arriba.
So we'll move on to our first information item, the presentation of the COVID-19 response plan.
My apologies, but I'm the one translating, so I'm not sure if the other group is able to hear me. I keep getting muted.
Taking a pause for our translator. Just another reminder, if you're just joining us, we're taking a pause for our translator. Okay, we're all set. So we're on to item 8 of our agenda, an information item, presentation of the COVID-19 response plan.
Good evening, everyone. Just want to say good evening to President Dubois and to the Board of Trustees. It is with a pleasure to come before you this evening to lay out our plans in terms of how we as the district, Sequoia Union High School District, will respond to our current surge in COVID. Wanting just to start off by saying, in August when we opened school, we were all excited. We welcomed our students. Everyone was thrilled that we were back in in-person instruction. At that time, we made a commitment to our community, to our families, to our teachers, that we would remain open for in-person instruction. Now here we find ourselves at the end or mid of January, returning from winter break with a surge that none of us could have anticipated. It is very important for us and for me as your superintendent that you understand that the safety and health and wellness of staff, students, and families remain the priority for our entire district. And so with that, I come to you today with our plan in terms of staffing shortages. What will the district do? We've had so many questions. Do we have antigen tests available? Can we expand testing? What are the protocols in place if we have to have school closures? I want you to know that we remain committed as a district and as a board to in-person learning to the extent possible that our workforce is healthy. I also want to publicly thank our frontline workers, our teachers, our classified staff, our principals, working with our labor partners. We have all collaborated and agreed that, like science, like professionals in terms of psychology and our psychiatrists and the therapists have said, the best place for our students is in school. And so you have our total commitment that we are going to do everything within our power to make sure that our students are able to attend school. And so this evening, in addition to a plan, we will also bring forward a resolution for the board to consider as a call of action, as we will ask and request additional support so that we can honor our commitment to you, our community, our family, to continue to provide in-person instruction for our students. And so with that, I have my team with us who will be presenting today. And we have Dr. Elizabeth Chacon, who is our Assistant Superintendent of Student Services. We also have with us Bonnie Hanson, who is our Assistant Superintendent of Educational Services, and also Todd Bill, who is our newly joining our team member, Assistant Superintendent of Human Resources. And then also we have a special guest, our partner, the CEO of Worksite Labs, and that is Mr. Gary Frazier, who will be presenting for all of you today. And so with that, we'll start. Todd and Bonnie, thank you.
All right. Well, good evening, Board President Dubois, board members, Superintendent Dr. Williams. Again, my pleasure to present today on a couple items that we have. Bonnie and I are going to tag team on this presentation for human resources and educational services. So first part will be HR, and COVID has definitely had a huge impact on the human resources side of education. Over the last 2 years, we know we've had to confront a lot of different areas related to education, safety, and also the people side of things, not just their mental health, but also trying to get the teachers, the staff into the schools and in the classrooms so our students do have the education that they need. But just a little bit of background, what we have right now, things that we're facing. As we're aware, there's actually a nationwide labor shortage. In fact, looking at some of the research out there, that there's about 62% of people that are participating in the labor aspect of it, which means a large amount of people technically are not in the labor force. And so we're seeing that nationwide, but more so we're seeing it within our district. Our overall labor impact that we have with our district is actually pretty good. Most of our positions are filled. Our biggest concerns are going to be our classified staff. But it's not the vacancies that are really hitting us. It's really going to be the absences are what we're seeing, and the absences related to COVID, not just with individuals, but also with their families. But as you'll see in here, again, California in general is struggling with teacher shortage. Right now, about 80% of school districts are negatively impacted by the teacher shortage, which is something because we have about 1,000 districts within this state. And so that's a large number of districts that are feeling that shortage due to the teacher aspect. In general, you'll see too, is about 300,000 teachers are needed throughout the state. The number of teachers out on leave due to the positive COVID test inflates the ability for the district to cover classes. That really has been our difficult part, especially with this recent surge of the absences that have occurred, and for us to be able to fill those positions. Adding to the issue, unfortunately, there are fewer people that are applying for substitute teaching credentials. And there are a lot of different reasons for that, and just subs in general. Oftentimes we try to rely on some of our retirees to come back. That's been difficult because they look out for their own health. They have maybe some health issues, or people at home have it. In general, we're also seeing is that there's a lot of opportunity for people to work at home compared to having to go into a site. So they're finding a lot of jobs that are more home related. And on the third issue with this, reaching out to some of our substitutes and asking, how come we're not filling these spots? They also are concerned about their own safety and the safety of those at home. So we have roughly about 100 substitute teachers on call that are able to help us out. That is down just a little bit from the beginning of the year when there's about 110. So we're not seeing a huge decrease in the number of substitutes we have. Our issues are getting the substitutes to come to the classrooms and help us out. What's been helpful, hopefully, as we're seeing some of the changes, that we did increase the substitute pay. The board had approved that not too long ago. Right now, I can say I know our competitor district is San Mateo, and we're a little bit higher than them on sub pay, so it's always positive that we can beat somebody else out on that. We have received some staffing flexibility from the state. So I put this together, and then honestly, like a day or two later, the state changed some things, which is for the positive, but to kind of keep things update. The flexibilities that we look at, some are consistent. We've had those in place already. One is a teaching permit for statutory leave, or TPSL. That's able to take a substitute teacher who's already a sub, give them a special credential in which they can go long-term. And this was originally put in place when you have individuals that were out on medical leave or maternity leave. So they can actually be in that classroom until that leave was expired, which is a good thing to be able to do. We're also able to extend the number of short-term subs. This actually had changed as of yesterday. So instead of going through 60 days, the substitute teacher can actually be there for 120 days, which is huge to have someone there long-term. Our biggest concern with this is that it's for general education students. What they didn't change was special education, which is some of our most at-need students, and yet they're not expanding the number of days for a substitute to be in that class. So what we'll see is still in the special education time, or special education students, is still kind of a rotation basis of subs instead of having some consistencies. There are some waivers to retirement penalties for teachers. Two parts to this. One is there was a 6-month waiting period that retired teachers had to have before they can go back and teach. That was waived. So basically someone could retire and the following day come back in the classroom and sub. The other thing that was waived on this is when it comes down to CalSTRS, the teacher retirement system, is there's usually a max about $48,000 they can earn. Otherwise, they get penalized for going over that. The state had waived that as well, which is positive. Again, that way they're not worried about having to go over that and get penalized. There's also alternatives to CBEST, multiple alternatives that we could look at. There's also short-term staffing permits. These are people who, in all reality, just graduated with their bachelor's degree and are just getting started into a teaching program. And there's also provisional internship permits, which is those that are currently in a program for teaching, and they can get started early as a full-time teacher. A couple of things that they added just recently for our flexibilities. One is that a student teacher who's currently working with a mentor teacher can actually take their own class now. One way we can use this, if we do have someone on maternity leave, is they can then go into that classroom and teach, and so that mentor to help them out who would be on that school site. The concern with that is whether or not the colleges that they're participating in will allow them to do that. And that's something we're having to work with, is with our colleges. And the next part's on here is some of the active approaches that we're using. Again, using some of those flexibility options by the state, we're communicating that out to our teachers. We're already working with our student teachers to be able to come in and work with their colleges. Also, we're reaching out to parents to have them assist in the classroom. We're setting out a flyer tomorrow. That's where we post it, and letting them know that there's some flexibility for them to come into our district and help out in the classrooms. Again, recruiting retired teachers. We're paying teachers to cover the vacant classes. We actually increased that amount, which has been positive. We're going to see if that assists as well. We're also expanding our postings for classified positions. Instead of just posting an EdJoin, we're also doing things like Indeed, and we're going to look at other options such as Facebook and Twitter. Additional options are being considered, things we can talk about either probably later on, because it may be more contractual down the road. But those are some things we're working on right now to try to get our staff into the classrooms. Oops. So I don't know if we put questions now or wait till the end or. Sure.
All right. Can you talk about how you're reaching out to parents? Just what's the method of outreach?
Perfect. So like I say, we had some help from a parent at Mental Atherton who asked us, what can we do to help out a little bit? She had a flyer put together. We guided a little bit more with it, put it into the school newspapers. So that's the first thing we did. We then put that out to all the school sites so they can add that in the school newspapers. We just created a flyer. We're going to put that out there onto our website and then work with a communication system that we can send out to basically all parents in general. Of here's what the options are. Sure.
Is that happening this week or next week or later?
The
Already
flyer goes
happened?
out this week. We're going to work on next week to get the voice message out. All righty, Bonnie, you're up.
Our first joint presentation. We'll calendar it, send you a happy anniversary next year. So I'm here to talk about our continuity of learning options. And I know that you know this, but I don't think it can be stated enough times that we are not permitted to offer distance learning. So even if we wanted to go back to the system that we had in place during the biggest bump in the pandemic, where students and staff were Zooming from home, we are not allowed to do that. There is an opportunity for something called a J13A waiver that would have to be approved by first our county and then by the CDE, by which we would be able to close school for a set amount of time. I checked with our council right before this meeting, and as far as she knows and as far as I know, the state has yet to accept the criteria that any district has given them to be eligible for the J13A. They have all been rejected at this point. Most notably, this week was Sacramento with a 20% staff outage, being told that that was not a high enough number. Independent study for all is another option if we were to close schools, but it's not really an option for a large comprehensive high school. The reason for that is Ed Code says that the independent study program that we offer has to model our traditional independent study program. Our traditional independent study program is staffed at 27.51 teachers to student. So if you have 9,400 students and you divide that by 27 or 28, you can see just how many independent study teachers you would need to have to make that work. We are staffed at 27.5 to 1. So one could say, we'll just take all of your teachers and have them do independent study. Then you get into credentialing issues where a teacher at the high school level has to be credentialed in a subject area to teach it. So then one could say, well, then let's switch to Edgenuity. Then you have to get your whole teaching force up to speed on Edgenuity. And you've got almost 1,000 kids who are switching the mechanisms by which they're being assessed and the systems to which they've been used to learning all year. So in short, it's not really an option for us. If we were to do independent study, we would still be required to have in-school cohorts. But again, I'll be honest, I think that's just passing a hot potato. I mean, really? Addressing student absences. So Ed Code says, and we follow in our district, that students have a reasonable amount of time to make up absences. So for our students who are home quarantining, who are sick, they will be able to make up the work that they missed during those absences. We are really encouraging via our teaching staff and our site administrators and counselors and school personnel in general, students who are quarantining but feeling okay, to keep up on their schoolwork so they're not met with a great deal when they return. Every teacher in our district has built into their syllabus at the beginning of the year the way in which students make up work when they are missing. So it's not a new process to anyone. I'm grateful to SDTA for working in collaboration with us in a joint message that went out with suggestions based on our contract and our best practice about how teachers can not exhaust themselves while still making it possible for students to keep up while they're not in the classroom. One of those is making sure that students check Canvas every day for their assignments and instructional materials. Another is having contact information of peers in their classes who can help explain things. And every student does have the 24/7 paper tutoring to help them with assignments that are confusing. So of course, the teacher is a resource, but we don't want the teacher to be the only resource. Silver lining, Canvas is what most of our kids are going to use when they get to college. And they're going to be so familiar with it by the time that they get there based on what has happened over the last couple of years. And then in addressing staff absences, we're reminding staff to have emergency subplans at the ready in case they're not feeling well. Keep their Canvas pages updated as much as possible. We have minimum requirements for what teachers put on Canvas, but SDTA has jointly encouraged teachers with us to post as much as you can up there so that when you're trying to run your classes, that you've got that resource available for all your students as well. Support from prep teams for teachers as far as carrying the load with the lesson planning and the assessing. Student support from their peers, and then again, the paper support. So here's my bucket list. It's after the holidays, but here's what I would ask if I could ask Governor Newsom for anything. I would ask Governor Newsom for more flexibility in the independent study program requirements. As long as the state holds to us having to staff those at our regular staffing ratios, as long as they say it has to model a traditional independent study program that is set up specifically to serve well a very small portion of our student body on an annual basis, it's not really an option for us to do it. Secondly, I would ask that he extend the number of days that a substitute can be in a special ed classroom. I don't understand why you would want general ed students to have a continuity of the person in front of them and not offer that up to some of our students who are most dependent on agendas and reliability and comfort with the adult in the classroom. And the third thing that I would ask is that instead of just allowing retired staff to return full-time until March 31st, he allowed them to return for the duration of the school year. So for instance, right now in independent study, we've got 2 fantastic retired teachers who are working for us. They're both happy to go full-time. But if I assign them a full-time caseload of kids, I have to then take those kids off of their caseload by March 31st. So if you run into the governor, please send him my regards and consider sharing my list. Any questions? Chris?
I'll ask one, whether we can actually do more than trying to run into the governor in this case. Anybody have an idea whether it would be helpful actually to get this down and send it, a letter campaign? It seems to me we should let our local assembly people, state senators, as well as the governor aware of these asks, because they strike me as being very reasonable.
Yes. Yes, I would work with the team to, if that is the direction of the board, to formulate a letter.
I support that recommendation.
I wonder whether we might also make it available to parents to send in. Thank you.
Shanice, you have a question?
I'm sorry, I'm the A-man corner over here. So first of all, thank you for thinking of special ed because I don't think that's always spoken in our beyond just our district, but just at the state level. So thank you for that. I know we're going to be talking about the resolution later. And so I want to maybe hold that piece that maybe a couple of these we can put into the resolution. And thank you for explaining the substitute, not the substitute teacher, but the retired teacher. I think that if we're thinking like a crisis, which is what we're in, we're actually like post-crisis, but we're like transitioning out of it, that maybe it's easier to dig a hole in a crisis than it is to dig ourselves out of a crisis. And so that could be a strategy that we add to the resolution in addition to the letter and things of that sort. So the employee of the parents, I think parents want to know how they can support. So I think if we can figure out, because I know we have our parent advisory council that meets with you, we have Reopen, and we have a couple of parent groups like Innovate Parents. And so we have to figure out how to access those and the energy of those parents, because they believe in us and believe in the public school system, and they know that we're strapped in some ways. The last thing, I have a question for you, Bonnie. I'm sorry, my nose is itching. But you had said, going back to the PowerPoint, can you go back to the one before this? Here it is, about Canva, checking Canva every
Canvas.
day and all that. Is there a piece, and I'm thinking about those kids who get overwhelmed, or this is kind of causing kind of like a trauma reaction because maybe they got so behind during the pandemic that they just shut down, right? Is there ways that we can parent with, I mean, not parent, but notify parents in this, or so that some students may need homework assistance at home with their parents to help organize them?
Right.
So I'm just trying to figure out that piece.
Yeah, so parents have access to the Canvas as well, and there have been multiple trainings at all the sites on it, for better and for worse. This is our second go round at depending on Canvas. Students, the entire time that they were home for basically a year, were utilizing Canvas.
Okay. And last question, is Canva in Spanish by any chance?
Canvas,
Canvas, sorry, I got.
it's
Canva
okay.
and
It
Canvas.
depends on, not all of it automatically, but a lot of the directions, et cetera, are.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Any other board member questions? We move on to Worksite Labs.
Good afternoon, Board President Dubois, Vice President Ginn, Board Trustees, and Superintendent Williams. This afternoon, we would like to provide an update on COVID-19 in our district, our process for shifting guidance, guideline updates, current data, and how we're going to work with our lab partner to provide health resources for our community. I am Dr. Chacon, Assistant Superintendent of Student Services, and presenting with me this afternoon is Javier Gutierrez, our Sequoia Union High School District Health and Wellness Coordinator, and Gary Frazier, the CEO of our Worksite Labs partner. We want to provide the board and the community with a snapshot of the process for making changes to our COVID health and safety guidelines. Our updates begin at a high level with recommendations and requirements that are outlined by the Centers for Disease Control, who work with health officials to monitor the spread of the virus and make plans accordingly. When the CDC updates their guidance based on this information, the California Department of Public Health takes the information and works with state health officials to decide what is applicable and practicable based on state structures. CDPH then updates their guidance and shares it out with more localized public health teams. At this point in our area, San Mateo County Health, in conjunction with the San Mateo County Office of Education, update their guidance accordingly for schools and other local agencies. Once we have this information from San Mateo County Health and SMCOE, our district then takes the guidance, and we work with multiple partners like Worksite Labs, our administrators, our local unions, et cetera, to create an actionable plan to implement the guidance. This includes considerations of resources, finances, facilities. And once an actionable plan is in place, we communicate it to our school communities. As we know, our objective and governor's orders are to keep schools open and to keep students in school. The temporary pause in contact tracing presented in the resolution is to allow the district to regroup and align practices and updated guidelines. As of yesterday, January 12th, the county received an update and updated quarantine and contact tracing information from the California Department of Public Health, which they're planning to share with schools once they've created their own actionable plan around it. We are awaiting the updates and making plans in anticipation of this. Namely, group contact tracing and notices for students are no longer going to be done on an individual level due to such high case counts. Instead, we are looking at notifying all individuals who share an airspace as contacts. To be specific, when we return to contact tracing, a whole classroom would be considered a close contact rather than just those sitting within 6 feet of a carrier. So this will change the way we're doing seating chart evaluation, and it will increase our notifications. Javier is now going to share with you our current guidance related to athletics and extracurricular activities, as well as recent COVID-19 data.
We continue to follow our current practices and protocols for extracurricular activities and athletics. Those have not been updated yet by the California Department of Public Health or County Health, although there have been other updates, as was just highlighted. The guidance to extracurricular activities or athletics has not been updated these days. But we are in close communication with these agencies and CIF, the California Interscholastic Federation, and our local Peninsula Athletic League, when recommendations and or guidance are updated with CDPH and county health guidance. We follow the CDPH and county health guidance as was just highlighted a few slides ago. So currently, when it comes to school-based extracurricular activities and athletics, masks are required to be worn at all times indoors when not active. So that includes like being on the sideline, in the locker rooms, when there's a timeout. If you are a coach or a spectator, you are not actively participating. So that is when masks are required. The only time that they may not be worn is by participants who are active. So that means wrestlers that are actually wrestling on the mat, or basketball players that are actually in action playing basketball there. When there's a timeout or when you're on the bench or anything like that, you are required to wear a mask. If it is not practicable while athletes are active, then it is strongly recommended, although not required, that individuals undergo weekly testing. So we collaborate with our administration, with athletic directors, coaches, and health staff to encourage testing and respond to team situations with the safety of our students and staff in mind. Additionally, individuals playing instruments indoors that cannot be played with a mask, either use bell coverings and stay a minimum of 3 feet apart, and also encourage testing. This is our current data over the last 10 days. So it includes last week through just yesterday of this week. And you can see that in line with the nation, our numbers increased when we returned from winter break. But note that positive case counts are significantly decreasing each day this week, so we remain hopeful. Staff include certificated classroom teachers and counselors, as well as our classified staff, our support staff, and also our on-site partners. If we have a partner on site and they test positive, that still impacts our school community. So they are included in the staff count. We want to point out that this data reflects the cases that are reported and confirmed to us. It does not mean that they were on campus. It does not mean that transmission occurred on campus. And in most cases, fortunately, they don't. But just want to make sure that that note is pointed out, that this includes all the cases that are reported to us. So consider, the ones that were fortunately discovered before students returned from break. That is still reflected in our numbers, even if they are not on campus. So just want to make sure that we point that out.
We ask questions before you move on? Sorry, just.
We're at the end of the presentation.
Just related, School dances, is it, I have someone ask me about school dances. What's the, is there just masks, and is there anything with vaccines anywhere in any of it?
There is the San Mateo County Pandemic Recovery Framework has recommendations, although not requirements for testing, or sorry, for having vaccination requirements or testing negative prior to dances. Again, it's a recommendation, not a requirement. And some, depending on where the dance is held, I know some schools may be planning a dance, for example, in San Francisco, and we have to adhere to the local requirements where the dance is being held. So even though we're a San Mateo County school, if the event is happening in San Francisco, we have to adhere to those requirements. If a dance is taking place at our school, again, it is recommended, it is a recommendation for vaccination requirement or negative test, but not a requirement.
And do coaches or someone overseeing a team or a club have discretion to add extra requirements if they want? Or whose choice is it to do more than what's required? Who has that discretion?
Are you asking about the district or a school specific?
Well, within the, is it only the superintendent's decision? Is it your decision? Is it principals? Is it whoever wants to? I'm just wondering who has the authority to add additional requirements?
We would, if a school had specific questions about that, we would talk to the county and see what their advice was on that. So we really take that case by case because we follow county recommendations. And so anything that might be above and beyond, we would confer with the county.
Meaning that no one internally has discretion to change it without county approval?
We would want to collaborate with the county. I think the county might say that we have discretion, but we wouldn't want to do it in isolation without their recommendation because they have the public health experts that we don't have internally.
Thank you.
Mhm.
We meet with our school site leaders consistently for updates, and that we have agreed that we are all following the same protocols. And then following the same protocols is the district protocol that we are going to continue to adhere to our county partners in terms of guidance. So to your point, at this point, the only person who has authority to change would be to go through the superintendent, who would go through the county office of health, and then we would make that decision on a case by case. But no one has the authority to make individual decisions school by school.
Thank you. Any more questions on the data slides or activities? So in response to the numbers, we are going to do the following. Working with our partners, we're going to implement an increased staff and student special testing schedule. We're going to put in place post-isolation antigen testing for our staff, as they're required to show a negative test result prior to returning to work if they tested positive for COVID-19. And we're adding telemedical appointment structures for our school community. So I'm going to invite Gary Frazier, CEO of Worksite Labs, to present on these resources.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. So this is an effort just to really support the district. And so what we're doing is a baseline for a short period of time, 7 days, 17th, which is next Monday to next Sunday. We've created a schedule where we've consolidated most of our staff into 2 schools per day. And we've extended the hours so that instead of it being a normal, I think it's currently an 8-hour day, it's going to be a 12-hour day every single day for 7 days straight. So 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. And each of those locations will have ample enough staff to do up to 700 tests per day, which is a total with 2 schools together, 1,400 per day between the 2. What that means is that in this short window of time, we're going to really suspend the normal testing schedule that we had last semester, just for this window of time so that we can get everybody in with a priority focused on students and faculty. So that's the strategy here, is to just concentrate our efforts to make that happen. And in that way, the information that you want from a diagnostics is done all at once, and you have a good baseline of where everybody stands at that point. So there you go. So there's no questions on the one time. And by the way, once that week is over, we will resume the normal schedule that we had last semester, where we go back to the normal timeframes, the schools, et cetera, et cetera. In fact, and I jumped ahead, this schedule was open today. So I know we're making this announcement now, but we opened the schedule today for students and faculty to begin going in and schedule the way they normally have for those who have already done it. But obviously for many that haven't, you can go in now through, Monday to actually start getting on the schedule for all of next week. And it will remain open through next week as well until slots are full. And I think one other thing as I'm talking is coming to me, just because they're at Carlmont and Woodside on one day or Sequoia at another day, this is not to box anybody into that particular school. So the students and the faculty can crisscross. If they get on the scheduler and they see that the Sequoia day is full at Sequoia, then they can look for another day or another campus to find a spot to fit in. They don't have to stick to the school that they attend or that they work at. So that's the other thing. Okay.
And can I say one thing? I'm sorry, Mr. Frazier. I
Yes.
just wanted to make sure that we're clear to our community. We love having our community come out and test and to provide that service, but so we can get an idea of how many of our students and staff members are positive. We are asking for this week that we reserve appointments only for Sequoia Union High School District students and staff, faculty, staff. So that means just for this week, we will not provide testing for parents, for community members, family members, only those students enrolled in Sequoia Union High School District and staff members and faculty members.
Correct. And that brings up another point. So prior to us making this adjustment, the community, as in parents and others, have had access to put themselves on our regularly scheduled days at certain schools. And as of just yesterday, there were already probably 100 people on the schedule for Sequoia, maybe another couple of hundred at Woodside. And so what we decided is that for those people that were already on the schedule, you're good. You can stay on the schedule. So if anybody, parent was just on there because they booked 2 weeks ago, they can stay. It's just that what we don't want to do is add additional people, because what will happen is that we'll go over our capacity, our daily capacity. And then that's when you get the long lines, and that's when you get the inefficiencies where people start to be upset and complaining, because now you've got, instead of 1,400 a day, you got 2,400 a day rolling through. So I just want to say that we're going to honor anybody that's already on the schedule because they scheduled way far in advance.
One other question on those logistics. 1,400 a day over the 7 days is about the 10,000 that we would see for all of our students and staff across the district. Is it limited to only one appointment per individual over the course of the week?
Yes. Yes. Thank you. Okay, antigen testing. So as it's been brought to our attention, in order to come back to work and to school, the best mode is to use an antigen test versus a PCR test. And I won't get into the science, but a PCR test, if you've been positive with COVID, you will likely be positive for probably up to 3 months. That's just the science behind what's called a molecular PCR test. And that's just how it works. It doesn't mean that you're still shedding. It doesn't mean that you're still sick. Whereas an antigen test is set up really to capture folks that are symptomatic in the moment. That's why antigen tests are really good if you have symptoms. And so the ability to test someone post-isolation after they've come down and they're well again, an antigen test would show up as negative if you are no longer symptomatic and showing symptoms. So I understand why the district and other agencies have adopted this methodology. But what we want to do is staff members who were COVID positive and have completed their isolation need to have a proof of a negative antigen test, which is different from the PCR. We're going to set up an in-person drive-through in the interim a station here, I believe, at the district office. The current schedule will be Tuesdays and Fridays for just a 4-hour window of time. So that's going to be a set schedule. But we're going to start next Friday because we have to set everything up. And then from then on, after whatever next Friday's date is, the 21st, it'll be the following Tuesday, and then Friday, and then Tuesday and Friday going forward. And so the idea is much the same as the PCR. The difference is that it will be a drive-through. So people won't be getting out of their cars, standing in line and walking up. Someone will go to their window and instruct them through this process, which is something that we do currently at San Jose Airport. And we do the same thing at SFO, where people just drive up and no one gets out of a car. So that's usually a very efficient and fast process that takes all of maybe, 2 to 4 minutes tops for someone to come through and then go. And then the resulting and everything else will be the same as the PCR. In fact, there will be a schedule open just like for the PCR. Actually, it'll be the same portal, but it'll have a return to work option. And when they click that, it'll bring them basically to this one location for them to get on the schedule and do exactly the same thing that they would normally do for their PCR, only it's an antigen. I believe that's it on this topic, but that's just the current short term. I will move to what I'll call a future state, because so one, the reason that the parents, or I'm sorry, the faculty are being brought here and not crisscrossing at any of the other sites is because we know that they were positive and confirmed positive, and so having them intermingling at the other sites where we're just doing normal what we call surveillance testing is probably not the best idea. So that's the reason why the antigen return to work testing is being done separate from the other locations. Well, in that same vein, the idea of people who were positive kind of staying isolated until we know that they're not, this is why we propose sometime 3 to 4 weeks out, we should be set up to be able to allow those people to go online, schedule an appointment with a provider to essentially monitor the administration of the kit. This is important because it's what we call chain of custody in healthcare. The reason why you want someone watching you is to confirm that you're the actual person with the swab that's swabbing your nose. I mean, it's that basic. And so telemedicine allows us to meet that requirement while at the same time keeping them at home. So someone would basically go online when they're ready to come back to work, schedule their telemedicine appointment, and then they can come here to pick up their kit and drive off and 2 days later or a day later, whenever their appointment is online, go ahead and do the telemedical visit and everything will be done and they'll be resulted positive or negative. The school will be notified, they will be notified, and it will be the normal process. It just takes time for us to set up. Mostly it's about the human resources, as you guys talked about earlier, making sure that someone is on the other side of that telemedical consult, being able to recruit those people so that they're available during these time slots is what takes probably the longest time to set up. The technology is already there. I mean, we've all been on various forms of two-way communication, Zoom and others. So it really is about getting and recruiting the providers to do that. And as we get closer to that, more details about that will be shared as to exactly how it works and how we'll prove certain things and how results will be sent. But it should be much the same as it is now. It's just the consult will be telemedical. I believe that is it. Yes.
I'm wondering how you are in capacity, because I notice these are staff, which is fantastic. Is it also students, or are students expected to antigen a different way?
So we're just receiving the updated guidance. And so we're going through that guidance. Right now, it's just staff. That's the capacity and the bandwidth that we can manage. And so in the future, we're looking to expand to students, but right now we only have the capacity for staff.
Yeah. And so like when we start, it'll be the 4 hours, Tuesdays and Fridays. That should be enough to handle all of your staff, regardless of what school they're from. Yeah.
So we have a number of staff that don't live in our county. So how are we managing that? I think you're saying they have to come to this campus to get it, but they may live far. So how are we making adjustments or not making adjustments for that?
So here's why the call of action today is important, because we are extending ourselves. We are creating a robust testing program, and we are going over and beyond to ensure the safety of our staff members. And so there are some modifications we just don't have the bandwidth to make. And so to your point, to date, there are not any adjustments. This is the best that we can do. Now, if we have a partner somewhere out there listening and they have a space for us to expand to another location where we can offer a regional antigen testing, we're open for that. But right now, we only have the bandwidth and capacity in terms of staff to have it here in one place location.
So then the expectation is, I'm just putting it out there, if you're a staff that lives in Alameda County, you are expected to come here and get the test, to get the test or whatever.
So the expectation is not necessarily there. The requirement is that you have a post-antigen test. The service that is being provided by the district is that we offer it for you. You can go anywhere and get that. You can go to your provider, your healthcare provider, and also take that test as well. But for convenience and as a service and consideration to our community, we are offering that level of support.
Yeah, and I would punctuate that point is that this is all augmentation, right? This is, and I commend you actually as a district for offering this, but because you're right, if someone has Kaiser or they've got another provider that's near their home, nothing precludes them for getting any of these services from their local provider. But the fact that the district is offering this as an alternative, or not an alternative, in addition to, I should say, then that makes it makes access that much better.
So then my last thing is that there is a comment out there. I just went to a call where they did say that some of our providers are having 5-day waiting periods to even get a test. So for us to offer this and for people to take advantage of that will be supportive. I guess my last thing is just more of a technical question. So if someone goes to another place to get a test near their home, they just provide documentation for us that they're negative or whatever, and we can get that through records. Okay.
I am seeing that there are some public comments. I'm wondering if it's okay with the board if I.
Are we done with the presentation yet?
Oh, we're not. Okay, I thought he was done. Sorry about that.
So I also did want to underscore the mental health aspect of these telemedical services, just providing consult remotely for people with positive results. We know that it can be an immediate relief to individuals and to family who've received hard news about being COVID positive. So it's just another benefit to having these telemedical appointments. And now I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Williams to highlight what we are asking for and talk a little about the resolution.
And so good evening again. So as you can see, we have made the health and safety of our community our priority. And so with that, we have put together a robust response to the COVID pandemic spike, the surge, Omicron, just to keep our schools safe and to continue to offer in-person instruction. And so as you can see, we have the telemedicine appointments. We have the post-isolation testing. We're expanding testing and trying to get a baseline for our students and staff so that we can measure and monitor our positive cases and also predict when we might need sub-coverage. And then also we are continuing to provide N95 masks and test kits to the extent possible. And so we're doing all of this in our effort for us to continue to stay open to the extent possible so that our workforce is healthy and that our students are able to advance their educational program. And so you wonder, why a resolution? What are we asking for? Well, we want to continue to collaborate with other community partners. As you heard, are we able to offer more testing regionally for our post-isolation testing for teachers or staff members who need to come back? If there are folk who have more masks, we are asking for donations, or if you can, you have access to an inventory, we ask that you be so kind enough to donate. Also to build upon home test kits, instructions and supports to follow up, because some of our parents and our students struggle with those instructions. And so sometimes we cannot be available. So it would be great if we were able to collaborate around having a telemedical system where students and parents could call in and we can instruct them in terms of how to take the test. Also, if we were to work together to design a community database for contact tracing for the purposes to blunt the impact of the virus. And then also, this is what we know is going to help to stop the spread, minimize or mitigate, is to provide vaccination clinics. We know that boosters are approved for 12 to 15-year-olds. And we know that students receive Pfizer and Moderna can now get their boosters 5 months after completion of the primary series. And then staff, more people to help us for testing. As you can see, it's a need. If you can see our numbers, if we were to go back to the slide, we have increased in terms of our positive cases. And so if we have folk out there who can help us, if we have folk who are medical assistants and they want to join forces with worksite labs, if you are an LVN and you're not already extended, or an RN, and you want to extend your skills and your support. We've already been in contact with Kenyatta College, working with Chancellor Michael Clare to assist us, as well as with President Kim Lopez. And then the other is we want to create a coalition of experts to guide and to provide training for our staff for redesigning schools. Because look, this is what's happening. Our pre-pandemic school structure is not the same, and it is not structured for us to respond to a pandemic. And so in thinking forward and thinking about the future, most likely the pandemic is going to become an endemic, is going to be with us. So what are some of the structures that we are going to have to shift in order to continue to provide robust instruction for our students? And so it would be awesome if we were able to collaborate with partners around the state, locally, from the federal level, so we can have these conversations and build this coalition. And finally, what I would like to say is, I would like to just extend appreciation to our Board of Trustees for taking this bold step. In addition, I'd like to also thank Superintendent Nancy McGee and the county superintendents. We have a wonderful support system, and we're all collaborating around how do we best address the surge that we're having right now. How do we continue to keep our schools open? How do we continue to show our staff that they are the priority, our families? And how do we continue to protect what we know as great public education? And so with that, I just want to say the last thing. We are committed to staying open to the extent that we have the resources, that we have the workforce, and that we have the will to get through the pandemic. And I ask each of you, as we go through our strategies and our services, be kind. Please be patient. Know that we are doing the best that we can do. And while we are not healthcare providers, we are doing our best, but we are strained, and we are trying our best just to give you a service so that you feel comfortable, you feel safe. But if we can get help, boots on the ground, to support these efforts and help keep students and staff safe, we welcome that, and we welcome that commitment. So with that, I just want to thank everyone. If you have questions, please feel free to contact our COVID website, to go to our website. We do have a email address, and we'll go over it. We'll actually post it for you if you have any questions. We will be posting a question and answer fact sheet for you to refer to, and just know that we will continue to refine our processes in the best interest of everyone in Sequoia Union High School District. With that, thank you, and I'll turn it over to our president, President Dubois.
Thank you so much, Superintendent Williams. So I think I would like to go for public comment, and then we will come back to see if there are any additional questions or comments from the board and our student trustees, if you have any
Can I
comments.
provide one point of clarification for Trustee Ginn with your question about dances, there is a California Department of Public Health guidance on mega events. And that has definitions for mega events outdoors and indoors. So when we consider dances, currently the guidance is 1,000 attendees or more is considered a mega event indoors on January 15th. So that is Friday. That will update to 500 or more, excuse me. So whenever there are 500 or more attendees indoors, it is considered a mega indoor event or indoor mega event, which requires either proof of vaccination or a recent negative COVID test. So that is per the California Department of Public Health. And depending on how the dance is or maybe where it is, we'll likely have more than 500 people in attendance, making it a mega indoor event. Sure.
Okay, on to public comment. Looks like there are just a couple of Zoom participants with their hands raised. Just a reminder that you are limited to 3 minutes and you will see a timer on the screen. Staff is monitoring the timer and you will be cut off at the end of 3 minutes. First speaker is Edith Salvatore.
Hello. I want to thank the district for the work that they've been putting into these recommendations. SDTA has also put out to our membership some talking points, ways to contact the legislators, and just a moment ago, an AFL-CIO petition that we're sending around in the hopes of reinstating state and federal COVID leave. As the superintendent mentioned, school staff are the frontline workers who make it possible for schools to stay open in person. And as we have to quarantine because we are in school, and we are trying to be responsible and prevent our students and community from getting more infected, it is not fair that we potentially use up all of our allocated sick leave or go into unpaid time. And so we appreciate that. We appreciate the district recognizing the burden that there has been on our members to cover classes for each other, which has been only augmented this few weeks, and raising that coverage amount. We are hoping that the district will not take long in establishing the new contact tracing protocols. It's not encouraging to our members to hear that we're flooded by COVID cases, so we can't tell you if you've been exposed, which is essentially what pausing contact tracing sounds like to our members. So we're looking forward to the new contact tracing following the new guidelines. We also very much appreciate the provision of the antigen testing to allow for shortening quarantines for asymptomatic or very mildly symptomatic quarantine cases. I was wanting to clarify though on Trustee Stevenson's question about being able to access those tests other places, how that works with the sort of chain of evidence concern of making sure that the test that is being presented as a negative test actually was the test of the person who is quarantining and coming back. So how we can prove that if our medical provider doesn't have antigen tests, but we have them on our own. Thank you.
Thank you. Jackie Sebrian.
Hi. First, so I'm Jackie Sebrian. I am co-president of the MA-PTA, but I'm actually just speaking as a parent of a senior at MA. And what I want to say is thank you so much to like the board, the teachers, the school support staff, the administrators. The job that you've done so far this year to keep in-person learning has been amazing. And The teachers have been awesome and understanding because our kids are struggling. As a teacher at Oak Knoll, I know how important the teamwork is, so I really value it. And I absolutely love the call to action of the state to provide like health professionals to do the health professional jobs and go back to letting teachers do the 27 things they were doing before. So thank you is really all I wanted to say.
Thank you for the public comments. Board, any other comments or questions? Student trustees, anything to add? Carlos? Our student trustee would like to make a comment?
Good evening, everybody. I actually just wanted to speak to Mr. Frazier. On behalf of the student population, thank you for the testing your company provides. I was there today and I had really great, I've been going, but I had a really great experience. I did witness somebody getting a little bit, it was one employee and there was a community member being a little bit difficult, but he persisted and he was very, very friendly and very kind and very patient. And I just wanted to say thank you again, because it's a huge help. And I'm sure a lot of us here really appreciate the services you're providing.
Thank you for that nice comment. Sarver?
Yeah, I wanted to do a little bit of a segue from the presentation we've had to the resolution we're talking about. We had a presentation of how the current impacts of the Omicron wave are ballooning and spiking and impacting all of us. We had a comprehensive plan presented for additional steps that are going to be taken to try to deal with that and keep our district on track. And what is implied behind all of that is the tremendous amount of work that our district staff and the staff throughout the district have been doing. And looking back, we came out of a year plus of teaching in ways that we had never imagined before, with great acrimony and great difficulty. We came into too short of a summer before returning to classes, in which most of our staff ended up having their summer consumed with planning for that transition. We came through a first semester that was executed extraordinarily well to bring our students back into the classroom, to begin to live school life as normally as we could with the ongoing pandemic. And we went into a winter break that we had made a point of recognizing how overstressed every member of our staff was, and how critical it was for our staff, our students, our families to have downtime, quiet time, recovery time, family time, to get ready for our second semester and to get ourselves a little bit back to a healthy frame of mind and body. And that winter break was consumed for most of the professionals in this room by planning for the onset of this tremendous new spike that's taken us to a level that we haven't seen before. And part of the result of that is what we have just seen is a comprehensive new plan that has been polished up and presented during the first 2 weeks of operation of our second semester within this spike. One of the questions I have to ask myself is, where in the midst of all of this extraordinary behavior do we find running a school district? We all have the responsibility ongoing of taking care of the education of our students, our high school students in our community. And yet all of this is layered on top of it to make it be a safe enterprise for all of us. The point to the resolution we're about to address is to distinguish between the educational responsibilities for which the institution of the Sequoia Union High School District exists and the massive public health responsibilities that are presented to all of us as part of keeping everybody safe while participating in the enterprise. The resolution is saying these are the things that our district is doing to meet this extraordinary need. And these are the things that we need public health expertise, resources, and personnel to help with in order to allow us to achieve all of that.
Alan, I haven't moved on to the resolution yet. Did you want to save your comments to the next part?
That's my take on what I've seen.
Yeah, we're still on item 8. Any other comments or questions?
This is just the resolution.
We're not on the resolution yet. We're-
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I'm
we
on
are
the
still
wrong-
on item 8, information items. And if there are any comments or questions, yeah, the resolution will be set up by the board president. So we're done? Okay, thank you all for that very informative staff. I think that very informative presentation. I think it is very reassuring to our community, all of the work that you have done. And I thank you all for working so hard. And thank you, Worksite Lab, on behalf of the board. I just want to share, my husband and I, when we had to travel because my mom passed away, so we had to travel to San Diego. And so when we came back, I really needed to be tested. I did not want to take a spot at our schools. So we went to one of the community sites and waited in line for 6.5 hours. So thank you for serving our district so well. And nobody had any type of wait like that. So thank you. Very professional.
And I thank you for the turnaround time. Not only do we not wait long, but within 24 hours, we have a result. So it's not a 6-hour wait, and it's not a 5 or 3-day wait for your results. Typically within 24 hours, you have your results. So thank you so kindly for being a thought partner and being willing to work with us throughout this pandemic for solutions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So now we are moving on to item 9, our action item of turning of a resolution that was created collaboratively with the Board of Trustees and our superintendent. Is it the will of the board for me to read the resolution? I'm seeing no, and I see a no and I see a yes.
Well, I don't know if we have comments about some, or do you want to read it and then discuss potential changes, or
That's
how do
what
you
I
want
was
to do that?
Thinking, Dr. Williams, what do you prefer?
Yes, read it.
Do you want me to read it?
Yes.
Okay.
Huh?
I will do that. So this is Resolution 1702, a call to action to prioritize the support of public schools regarding COVID-19. On behalf of Sequoia Union High School District students, this resolution is a call to action addressed to federal and California public health officials, requesting that such officials immediately dedicate emergency public health service workers and resources to Sequoia Union High School District and other California public schools to address the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on student learning. Whereas the governing board of the Sequoia Union High School recognizes that public schools and programs are an important part of the infrastructure of communities. Public schools provide safe, supportive learning environments for students and employ teachers and staff. Schools also provide critical services, including school meal programs and social, physical, behavioral, and mental health services. Schools have other benefits for the community, including enabling parents, guardians, and caregivers to work. And whereas the governing board of the Sequoia Union High School District is committed to keeping its schools open to in-person full-time instruction, despite teacher, staff, and substitute shortages and absences, and consistent with California Department of Public Health and local public health safety mitigation protocols and requirements, to the extent that it is deemed by public health departments safe to do so. And whereas we recognize that in-person learning is the best way for our students to learn, and we are committed to full-time in-person learning and ensuring with staff and families that sites are safe as possible for our valued teachers, staff, and students. And whereas California's public schools are not currently staffed, funded, and adequately trained to provide public health department services. Contact tracing, COVID-19 testing, monitoring of students and staff symptoms of potential illness, safety mitigation resources, and safety protocol mandates have burdened public school staff with additional responsibilities well beyond their staffing, funding, resources, and training, and have thereby shifted the focus of public schools, teachers, and staff from educating students to instead prioritizing the performance of public health department duties and functions. And whereas public schools are facing severe staffing shortages, insufficient testing resources, insufficient access to vaccination clinics, and a shortage of safety mitigation resources. Public schools have been funded, staffed, and designed to provide students with an effective learning environment. However, public schools do not have sufficient and qualified staffing and resources to ensure adequate testing, vaccination clinics, contact tracing, and other safety mitigation measures for all children and staff. Such medically trained public health service staff and resources are within the purview of public agency health departments. School districts are currently straining under the staffing shortages and demands caused by the pandemic and the necessary resources required to keep students, staff, and communities safe. Immediate and significant staff and support from state and federal agencies and officials in an emergency need for our public schools. And whereas Sequoia Union High School District and other public schools have consistently dedicated teachers and staff and significant resources to protect their students, staff, and communities by mitigating the spread of COVID-19 through safety mitigation measures. And whereas Sequoia Union High School District is implementing the following measures in an effort to keep our schools open for in-person instruction. 1, maintain partnership with worksite labs. 2, offer mass testing for students and employees only starting Monday, January 17th through Sunday, January 24th from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. at various district sites. 3, deploy district office staff to schools to assist with classroom coverage when necessary. 4, if state or federal law does not provide additional COVID-19 related leave this school year, the district will negotiate with its labor partners regarding COVID-19 leave for purposes of quarantining employees that test positive for COVID-19. The district will rely on COVID-19 emergency response package funding if available for such leave. 5, encourage community members and parents to apply for employment with the district as appropriate to temporarily fill COVID-19 related vacancies, substitute teaching, custodial, etc. 6, provide antigen tests for all staff to the maximum extent that these supplies are available to the district. 7, provide surgical level masks for staff to the maximum extent that these supplies are available to the district. 8, provide COVID-19 testing at district facilities through worksite labs. 9, provide post-isolation antigen testing in person and via teleconferencing through worksite lab to the maximum extent that these supplies are available to the district. 10, temporarily discontinue contact tracing until the current surge is mitigated and the school district has sufficient staffing to conduct this work. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the recitals set forth above are true and correct and fully incorporated into this resolution. Be it further resolved that the governing board of the Sequoia Union High School District recognizes that a state of emergency in the state of California continues to exist and has escalated due to the COVID-19 pandemic and its variants. And be it further resolved on behalf of the Sequoia Union High School District students and public schools that it is hereby making a call to action to all state and federal health officials and government agencies to take emergency action to protect the health and safety of all students, public school staff and school communities by doing the following. 1, deploy emergency service public health care workers and staff to Sequoia Union High School District to support the continuation of in-person full-time public school instruction through COVID-19 tests, testing services, clinics, vaccination clinics, and medical services. 2, provide sufficient additional state and federal funding for safety mitigation measures and resources. End of resolution. So should we check in for public comment or first? I don't think we have any cards, no cards. Are there any members of the public that would like to make a comment on this resolution? I do see one hand raised. Okay, yeah, I'm gonna pause for a second. If anybody else would like to make a comment. Okay, Edith, go ahead.
SCTA would just, I'd like to reiterate, we encourage the Board of Trustees and the district to look at options to adjust contact tracing rather than pause contact tracing. And though we would like to be confident in the state and federal government to do the right thing, we encourage the board and the district to make the decision this evening to grant the 5 days of COVID leave for those who have had to be who have had to quarantine, understanding that if COVID leave is provided by the state, that we can redesignate those days and thus redesignate that that budget, but that we don't want our members to be left hanging, unsure of where they stand, should they become symptomatic later in the year and not have days because they were forced to use them now. Thank you.
Thank you. So I don't see any other public comments. Chris?
Ready for board deliberation and comments? I'd like to say I'm strongly supportive of the resolution, primarily because it provides such a clear statement of this dual commitment we have in the district to in-person learning and also safe environments for our teachers and students. That stands out for me, and I think it's important for the public to hear that. I also want to note that we're making the declaration at a time when issues are evolving, or they have for 2 years. And as an interesting example of that, just 20 minutes ago, the County Office of Education sent out an update, and it made reference to the State Department of Public Education's new guidance issued just last night. So one, we've got to realize the playing field is changing constantly. As a tiny example of that, and with some deference to the president of the SDTA, I'd like to suggest that on point 10 that has to do with contact tracing, which I think is something I'm hearing is evolving, that we might simply modify point 10 by adding a comma at the end instead of the period and say, except as advised by the State Department of Public Education or the San Mateo County Public Health Department. I would suggest that. The other thing, I don't think it requires a change of the resolution. I wouldn't see it as such, but Edith Salvatore's request about the 5 days of absence strike me as worthy of doing, essentially. But I don't think we want to because of the outreach to the state, and we'd like to get the state money first if that's possible. So I support the resolution, would like to support the resolution with one modification if my colleagues agree.
I think I'm seeing lots of head nodding for that suggestion. Yeah. Is that?
I agree with making section, I have a few comments additionally, but I do agree with making section 10 consistent with current guidance. I think was what Chris was trying to say, which I believe, and Dr. Williams, maybe you want to suggest some wording, but if it's like a pause, or I don't know if you have something you want to suggest for that.
Yes, it's a temporary pause for about a week, just so that we can align our current practices to the updates.
So do you want it to, should we change the word to say something like that, or do you?
Yes, we can, just so that we are aligned to the new guidance or updated guidance.
So I have, I guess what I'll call a couple, maybe consider it a typo. In the first paragraph, we refer to emergency public health service workers. And then the resolution in the resolve section, we refer to emergency service public health care workers. Where I think of healthcare workers are people who work in a hospital or medical setting, which we wouldn't want them sending those people here. So I would suggest that we, in the resolve paragraph, use the exact same words as in the first paragraph, which is what we kind of just emergency public health service workers, because we're looking for people to help with public health service activities, contact tracing, administering tests, not healthcare workers. That's, I think it's mainly just a typo, just being consistent between the first resolve and the last resolve. And then in the second whereas, the word district is missing after, you read it, Carrie, but you read it, but it wasn't there. So adding that word district, those would be two typos. And then I guess those would be the two things that are just.
Did you say it was the first, it's the first two whereases? The word district is missing.
Yeah.
Oh, it's twice. Yeah, it's in there twice.
Yeah.
Or not there twice.
And I got it in a second. Whereas.
Alan?
Yeah, I've got two other typos as picky as that. In the, the second paragraph, we say mitigations where we mean mitigation, health safety mitigation protocols. And in the third, whereas the last line, that sites are as safe as possible. The first as is missing.
My only,
And then the other thing I had on the, at the top of the second page, we talk about safety mitigation measures for all children and staff. Do we really want to use the word students instead of children there? And I shot my wad of transition earlier.
All right.
Shawnee's?
Mine is not as technical as that. I was just wondering based off what Ms. Hanson had talked about in her presentation. I'm not for sure if this belongs here, but I want to put it out there, the inequities around special education and not having the technicality of the extension. I'm looking at the thing right now. Hold on, let me make it bigger so my eyes can see it. Bonnie, tell me if I'm right. The special education day extension to 90 days like everyone else. I think we need to point out the inequity of that. Oh, okay. Everyone else but special ed doesn't. So I think that is an equity issue. And typically when crisis happened the last couple of years, special education was a carve out and it just caused all kinds of trouble for our district. And so I just want to get ahead of some issues that it could cause us legally. So want to put that out there. And then allow the retirement staff to return full-time for the duration of the year. That's just my recommendation. And I hope that someone else will support that, or if it's not the right place, we can do something else.
I do think resolutions are the one time where we're trying to tell other people what we think they should do. I heard 3 great recommendations, and I wouldn't mind putting those 3 recommendations into the resolve section here to support what you said. If there's a third person, then basically I would take Bonnie Hanson's requests and add them to the resolve section.
But I think with special education, if you could add, it's an equity issue. I want to raise the issue around special education and the cost to the district, and that's one way of naming it, that it's an equity issue.
And I would be a third person in support of that.
Lots of hidden audience for these things. Only, I think question I have about this is just sensitivity that the whole community is under strain. I think at least 3 of us were on the San Mateo County call today, and we heard about the strain at our hospitals. And there is a shortage of health service workers in general.
These are public health workers as opposed to healthcare workers that we're asking for. That's why, that's the correction I was saying initially. We're not asking for people who work in hospitals. We're asking for people who work in public health.
But there's still a shortage, right? So do we have an idea of where these people will come from?
Well, we don't know until we ask. So we're putting the request out. And so there again, the Coalition of the Willing will respond. And I'm believing that there are folks out there who want to help and who have the space and time to assist us. So
So thank you for that change. So you made that change public. Yeah. Thank you for that.
So Carrie, it's in the first paragraph. And so just matching that in the result.
I see it now.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Any other comments? No? Okay. So I need a motion to
I
approve the
would
resolution.
be quite prepared to move for approval of the resolution with the recommended changes that have been made.
I second that.
Okay, thank you. And this is a roll call.
Student trustee Stead,
Yes.
student trustee Osuna. Trustee Thompson,
Yes.
trustee Stevenson. Trustee Sarver,
Yes.
Vice President Ginn,
Yes.
President Dubois.
Yes.
Motion adopted.
Thank you. That's to item 10, but I did want to, I always like to pause for any comments from board members. If we have the time for that or any agenda items. Anybody has anything?
This is
Just for
closing.
clarification, are we allowed to do that at a special? I don't think that we can do that.
Oh, we can't. Okay,
we're adjourned.
okay. Then I will adjourn the meeting. Thank you.
It wouldn't break the